Welcome back to Inside Story. We're discussing which way Serbia will swing as it elects a new president. Regardless of the outcome, it finds itself balanced precariously between Moscow and the West. Addressing the issues of Kosovan independence and joining the EU is no easy task. Serbs have Russian support in opposing a breakaway Kosovan state. Yet the major Western power, including most of the European Union, back an independent Kosovo regardless of Serbia's consent. For its part, Serbia seeks EU membership, but it must comply with a raft of EU conditions. Topping the list, full cooperation with the International Criminal Tribunal over war crimes in Bosnia, helping reduce ethnic tensions in Kosovo and tackling corruption at home. Well, joining us again are our guests in Belgrade, Ljiljana Smailovic, editor of Serbian daily paper Politika, in Moscow, political scientist Alexander Pikaev, and in London, author Tim Judah, an expert on the Balkans. Mr. Judah, interesting with regards to Ratko Mladic and Radovan Karadzic, wanted by the Hague for war crimes. Will Serbian cooperation in trying to find them and get them and take them to the Hague be changed, or will it be affected by whoever wins the presidency?
Well, probably not, because I think that the key actors in this are the government and the Ministry of Interior and the Prime Minister. So I think that we could probably safely say that whoever wins the elections, it probably won't make much difference. If Mr. Tadic is still the president, then there's no reason to believe that things should change. And if Mr. Nikolic is the new president of Serbia, then, well, he certainly won't be doing anything to persuade the Ministry of Interior or the Prime Minister to cooperate with the War Crimes Tribunal. So in the short run, probably not.
Ljiljana Smailovic, both Tadic and Nikolic oppose Kosovo's drive for independence. If you could explain to us the nuances in difference, though, can we say that Nikolic is the one who is most likely to possibly use force?
Mr. Nikolic has already declared that he would not use force and that he would not use the army. And certainly if he were president, he would have little to say about these matters because the government decides foreign policy, and the government's already adopted a certain action plan on what to do when and if Kosovo declares independence and is recognized. But Mr. Nikolic differs from Mr. Tadic insofar as he has made it very clear that he is in favor of the toughest possible answer. That does not include military intervention in any way, but it does include blockades, economic blockades, cutting off water, electricity, whatever damage.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
do.
You just mentioned that does sound pretty harsh. The tone is very, very harsh. Cutting off supplies, not recognizing passports, the signs are ominous.
Precisely. What I'm saying is that outside of military force, there's a lot of damage that one can do. And yes, this is being discussed openly by Mr. Nikolic, whereas Mr. Tadic is being far less direct and is implying that he would try to keep respecting or keep looking after Serbian interests, but would not be looking for trouble and would not be looking to sever diplomatic relations with the Western countries that recognize, for example. So there is a difference, although both men are equally tough in opposing for Serbia ever to recognize Kosovo's independence.
Alexander Pikaev, can we be sure that Russia will continually ensure for Serbia that they don't allow a resolution to go through the United Nations Security Council calling for Kosovo's independence?
Well, actually, Russia wants a resolution of the Kosovo problem, and Russia wants that resolution would be made through negotiations between Belgrade and Pristina. There is an opinion here that there is still room for continuing negotiations. The Kosovars were in fact provoked to be very tough on their independence because Americans told them in the beginning of negotiations that Americans would support their independence anyway. So if that was American position, why Kosovars should accept anything less than independence? But this is not how things should be solved in the 21st century. So if Kosovo would proclaim unilateral independence, if the United States and some EU members would recognize this independence, it would be their decision, and Russia would have to block recognition of Kosovo internationally, because we think it's illegal, we think that's against international law, and we think that it could create dangerous precedents for other parts of the world.
Do you think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, do you think that, sorry to interrupt you, do you think that it's a bit far-fetched that some people are saying that Serbia and Kosovo, but particularly Serbia, is becoming an unofficial battleground in a new sort of Cold War between Russia and Western powers?
Oh, no. We don't talk about any Cold War. We are talking about common sense and ideology. And this Kosovo, unfortunately, leading world members of the West support ideology, but Russia, China, and many other countries, let me say, including some EU members, support common sense. Why we accepted decades of negotiations in order to create a Palestinian state, and why Kosovo question must be solved within months. It's a bit strange, and it cannot be accepted, unfortunately. Yes, Russia would not accept, if Kosovo would proclaim itself independent unilaterally, well, it wouldn't gain membership in the United Nations, and it wouldn't gain membership in OSCE.
Mr. Judah in London, what will happen if Boris Tadic wins the election and then Kosovo secedes very soon after? Would it reflect very badly on his part in the eyes of his people?
Well, I think that probably most Serbs are resigned to Kosovo's independence by now, and I think that the question is not whether Kosovo becomes independent, but it's really the question of what Serbia intends to do afterwards, and how it intends to react, both vis-à-vis Kosovo itself, something that you've already mentioned, and vis-à-vis the outside world. So I think that really that's the key question. I think most Serbs realize that independence is coming.
Liliana Smailovic, you mentioned earlier that it's probably going to take 2 rounds for this vote to go through and for a president to be elected. Come February the 3rd, who do you think is going to be the next president of Serbia?
I think it's going to be Boris Tadic, but I beg to differ a little with Tim Judah. I think that it's also very well known to the public in Serbia that this presidential election was rushed a bit. Boris Tadic called for this election because he was under some pressure by his Western friends and supporters, and they told him and they wanted Serbia to have elections quickly so that then the Western countries, once they're sure that they have a pro-Western president, could proceed with recognizing the independence of Kosovo. And if this happens quickly in February, as is expected, it's not going to make Tadic look very good in the eyes, even in the eyes of the people who elected him, although of course they can see what's going on and why things are happening the way they are, but still there's going to be a price to pay. This is the unpleasant price of Kosovo and of being a pro-Western politician in Serbia at this time in history. You have to pay for what the West is doing for totally other reasons than Serbia, and there's going to be a price for all democratic politicians in a way. And I think Mr. Nikolic may be looking forward to that in the future.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's about as much time as we have on the program. Tim Judah in London, Liliana Smailovic in Belgrade, editor of Serbian daily Politika, and in Moscow, Alexander Pikayev from the Institute of World Economy and International Relations. All of you, thank you very much for joining us, sharing your thoughts with us here on Inside Story. It was fascinating hearing your thoughts, and also the viewer, thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and your suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. There it is on your screen, insidestory@aljazeera.net. From me, Imran Garda, and the rest of the team, bye-bye for now.